Welcome everyone to another edition of the AWS Blogger, where I try to bring you casual, fun, informative conversations about AWS. In this segment, we have a series of talks with MaiLan 𝗕𝗂𝗶 Global VP for AWS Block and Storage Services. In this episode, we're going to get to know MaiLan on a personal level, talk about working from home in the current pandemic. But before I bring MaiLan on, just a friendly reminder that at the end of this mini-series, we're going to do a live Q&A session. All right, so don't forget to subscribe to my channel and click on those notifications. Feel free to post your questions in the comments, and we'll try to ask them live during our Q&A session. Welcome, MaiLan. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Very good. Thanks for joining me in this mini-series. I'm really super excited about this, and I actually couldn't wait. I've been doing a lot of preparing for it.
I'm glad to be here. I love talking about S3. I think it's an amazing service, and I'm here to share any information I can with you and your viewers.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. So normally I want to jump right into the questions, but in a lot of my segments, I usually throw up like a pop quiz. So I have to ask you right away, before we jump into it, just one question, so you didn't have to study ahead of time. What was the first AWS service? And possibly, could you tell us when?
John, that one's easy. The first AWS service was Amazon S3, which was launched by design on Pi Day 2006. And to this day, John, I'll have you know that on March 14th, we have a celebration within the S3 team where everybody makes a whole bunch of different pies, and we actually do a charity event within the team where people can donate money to throw pie at each other. We take lots and lots of pictures, and every year we donate thousands of dollars to local charities in celebration of the launch of S3 on Pi Day.
Now that's an interesting one because it's been really a back and forth topic. I've heard that SQS was actually one of those as the first service launch. What's that?
So it is said. SQS actually came very shortly thereafter, as did EC2. But by the books, John, you got to go by the books, and by the books, that's Amazon S3 on Pi Day.
See, I like that, and I am talking to the right person to clarify those that pop quiz results. By the way, everyone, I'm going to post this. I'm going to post a quiz out there again. I want to see how many people really think that, you know, SQS, S3, or other services might be it, but I'm talking to the right person. So thanks for clarifying that. So let's get right into it. MaiLan, would you mind sharing just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is MaiLan 𝗕𝗂𝗶. I've been with AWS now for 10 years and spent a lot of that time in storage. I started off working in EC2 and have really enjoyed my entire 10 years in AWS. If you think about 10 years ago, the world was in a different place. People were thinking about cloud a little bit differently. But we knew, and a lot of our customers that were on the cloud knew, that it was absolutely the right choice for any business that wanted to transform their mission into something that mattered and impacted as many customers as possible. So it's been a fun ride. Looking forward to many more years.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you, especially in the block and object storage in S3, because everything that you look at, S3 is the underlying service that you're going to be utilizing. So everything's kind of built with that in mind. Agree, disagree, or what are your thoughts on that?
Totally agree. S3 is a really interesting service because, sometimes people will say, what should I use S3 for? And the answer to that is if you have any unstructured data, which is satellite imagery or video files of any sort, anything that you think is an unstructured data set, you put that in S3. If you have a semi-structured data set, like a CSV file, you put it in S3. If you have some types of structured data, like a 𝗕𝗂𝗸𝗃 file, you put it in S3. And so really, as you know, John, we say data has gravity, and that gravity center is absolutely Amazon S3.
I agree with you. You mentioned 𝗕𝗃𝗃. I'm actually studying for my machine learning certification. That's one of the topics that come up in there often. So that's I know what you're talking about now. I actually didn't know about it going into it. So That's actually really interesting. I actually want to get back onto the topic of you. I noticed when I was doing a little bit of research, I saw that you're a forestry volunteer. Can you tell us a little bit about that? That's actually very interesting. I have another topic as well, but I'm curious about this.
Yeah, for sure. So I joined the Peace Corps right after college. I'm actually, John, a second generation Peace Corps volunteer. My father, who is from Ohio, he heard the call to action from JFK about the Peace Corps. And the minute he heard the speech, he went out and he signed up right away. And so he was in one of the very first groups of volunteers that went out for Peace Corps. And he joined the Peace Corps and went to Nepal. And he taught the Nepalese constitution in the foothills of the Himalayas. And that experience set him on this path down into his career as a career Foreign Service officer. And I myself grew up in U.S. embassies along that journey that first started with the Peace Corps. For me, when I graduated from college, I too knew I wanted to go into the Peace Corps. And so I joined up and I was assigned a forestry specialty or a forestry area. And so I went to Mali, which is a very large country in West Africa, a very fine tradition of griot, which is telling stories through song. And I went to the northern part of Mali in the area, the town of 𝗕𝗂𝗓, which has the largest mud mosque of the world. And I lived in the village there as a forestry volunteer. And a lot of forestry work in West Africa, in this area that I was in called the 𝗕𝗂𝗓, is really about preventing deforestation. It's about being able to preserve the acacia trees and the species that were surviving in years and years of drought in the sub-Sahel area, and being able to educate around, how to avoid deforesting the rest of the trees that are available, and then also being able to plant new trees. And so my work was really in the village. I lived without electricity or running water. And I really, sort of like my father, I learned something really important in my time in the village. I learned many things. Actually, John, if you have any questions about sheep, I know a ton about sheep because I worked a lot with sheep herders when I was in Mali. But one of the things that I also learned when I was in the village is it's really about human potential. And so by that, what I mean is that here I was in the village, and I was working every day with Malians of different tribes in the north, and the power of human potential just came through every single day. Because a lot of the folks that I worked with had almost no schooling other than reading the Quran and going to religious school, but their depth of knowledge and the speed at which they were able to put together projects and the speed at which they were able to execute and really kind of transform the lives of the people around them, that sunk home pretty hardcore with me. And so when I returned out of Peace Corps, I got out of Peace Corps and I went back to the US and I started to work in tech, that power of human potential really stuck with me. And to this day, one of the things that I do every day is, I think deeply about how can I help develop the human potential, not just on my teams, but with my customers of the customers. There's this whole capacity out there to do amazing things, and the creativity and the spirit of that human potential is something that I continue to work on every day.
That I don't know. I'm kind of speechless. You mentioned not only living in different places, living in the embassies, living without the essentials that everyone's used to nowadays. Sheep. Don't forget sheep. I'm learning about those. I'm sure my daughter likes sheep, so I might have to go ahead and tell her. She plays Minecraft, so she's playing with some of the sheep, and she always has questions, so it's very interesting. That's very impressive. Is some of that a defining factor with you, now, like how you go about your day? Do you always look back on that and, realize, or just, how that defines you in everyday life?
There are a few things that I learned in Peace Corps. I talked about the human potential, but I also learned about tenacity and the importance of the mission. And that is one of the reasons why I've enjoyed my time with AWS so much, because AWS has a very strong mission. And the mission is to help every customer on AWS develop the applications that transforms their industries. What are we here for? We're here for, developing the most durable, the most secure, the most available storage for any type of application you want to build, whether it's machine learning, like what you're learning right now, John, or if it's analytics, or if it's Airbnb in the travel industry, you name it, that's what we're here to provide, that underlying infrastructure that you need.
I completely agree with you there, is that everything, when I talk to my partners or I'm talking to customers, those nice to have, what you need, what you're missing, that's really what I'm driving towards. And not only to help them, but to actually take that back. And what you said, a lot of the stuff that we develop, actually 90% of the stuff we develop is based off what our customers need. So that's really very true. And I take that to heart every day here. So it's a good point.
I think, John, too, this is, kind of to tie back to your first question of the first AWS service. S3 has been around for a long time. And what that ends up doing is giving you this incredible diversity of applications. We have applications that started off by just piling up a lot of data in S3 as just basically a secondary store for backup. And then over time, as the compute set evolved, they started building more and more applications on that data set. And it's a shared data set. And to me, this is what's really interesting about S3, is that you can take your unstructured, your semi-structured, some of your structured data, and you put it into this mixed data set in S3. And you can separate the growth of that data from all the compute that you want to build on top of it, whether it's compute that's run on instances or serverless or containers. And what it does is that really interesting separation helps develop applications at the speed of the business. But when you have such a broad variety of customers, you start building things that aren't available anywhere else and aren't really part of some old school definition of object storage. It's really, S3 is this unique thing that has grown up out of all of those customers' asks over, years and years of deep usage, where customers have grown from terabytes into, in some cases, exabytes, all being used by different applications.
That's another good point. In fact, I actually did. So here internally, we have some assessments we have to do. And one of the topics internally was S3 that I needed to complete by the end of the week. And I was like, oh, I need to do this. I was like, this is perfect timing to do this and also get a chance to talk to you about it. And I'm like, I'll be fresh. I'll be ready to go. So before I get into a little bit more of the questions, I got to talk to you about something that I saw on, it was a highlight video of you and talking to you as a diverse builder. I also noticed that you're a recreational boxer. So I personally think that's cool. And I saw some of those highlights. Speaking of that, I have some videos and some photos I'm going to bring onto the screen here. You know what? I'm getting right to it. So go ahead. Tell us a little bit about that. How'd you get into it and what does it do for you? It looks like you have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. Well, John, I got to say, when I was a kid, I had a lot of energy. And when we were posted with the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, China, I started to do the martial arts of wushu. I focused primarily on swords at the time, and I got really into martial arts. And so I picked up karate after that, did some American kickboxing when I came back from Peace Corps, and then started doing boxing. Actually, Seattle has a lot of really good boxing gyms around here. And so I started doing boxing about, I would say, 15 years ago, and keep doing that. I really love doing boxing. Pretty tightly knit with a couple of the boxing communities around here. Have a lot of sparring partners in between the different gyms. And then the other thing that I picked up most recently is a French martial art called 𝗕𝗂𝗏. And that is basically a form of boxing with your feet. And it's a really, really interesting martial art that I'm looking forward to getting better at.
Boxing with your feet, I'm curious. I'm assuming that's the movement, obviously, or, the quick movement. I'm always thinking of different terms, but can you explain that just a little bit more? And then we'll jump into the questions, but I'm curious about that personally.
Yeah, it's a fascinating martial art. It started in France, and it actually started in the port city of Marseille. And it was started from sailors on ships. And the way that it started was that these sailors had to fight. They were being boarded and they were fighting. And so the whole martial art was built around being able to hold on to ship rigging while you were literally hitting people with your feet, doing certain types of kicks. And so over time, the martial art has evolved. They brought in parts of Western boxing. And then they also introduced JKD, which is a martial art that Bruce Lee started. They incorporated a little bit of fencing into it too. And it's actually a really beautiful martial art. It's very hard because you have to be very agile and move around constantly. But in the sport of savate, you actually get more points when you make a clean strike with your feet as opposed to with a punch.
Interesting. So I'm going to have to look that up because that sounds really interesting. And so I'm going to move on here. The next one that I'm actually showing on the screen here as a transition is I got a couple pictures from exhibitions that you've actually done. You want to quickly talk about that? We'll jump into some things, but I think it's really nice to get to know you on a personal level. Plus, the boxing thing is very interesting to me.
Yeah, I just, if there's one thing I think about the art of perfecting your craft. And that is one thing that you learn as a martial artist, is that it's not about practice, it's about perfect practice. And it's about constantly perfecting your craft, doing drills, putting yourself into situations where you're under some duress, and that would be called sparring, where you're able to not just practice your craft, but you're able to do it in inventive and creative ways. And so, particularly for boxing, we have this mental model that we take called the boxer mindset. And basically what that means is that in whatever situation that you're in, how do you handle that situation? In boxing, it's very straightforward. You got somebody coming at you, that person wants to hit you in the face, right? And so what are you going to do about that? How are you going to react to it? How are you going to react to it if you try something and it doesn't work? You actually get hit in the face.
So that's actually a perfect segue into my next question. You said with boxing, you have to adjust. You have to adjust to certain situations. Let's just go right into it. How are you adjusting to the current situation, working from home all the time? Things are different, everything. So how are you doing virtually?
I think the first couple months, as with all of us, were a little tough. All my kids were home and they were all trying to adjust to this new world of online learning or classes being conducted, sometimes classes not being conducted. A family of 5, we're all living together 24/7, and we just had to adjust. And so I think one of the most important things for us, as is true for, I'm sure, many people, is being able to look for those quiet moments. And by those quiet moments, I mean those quiet, unique moments that you could have never had without being in this such situation, this very unusual situation. And so those quiet moments can be either with family members, or it can be some time to reflect on something that you're working on. I think that concept of being able to, as we talked about, be resilient, adjust, and really change your behavior in a way where you're not kind of treading water. You're actually getting better and more adjusted to the situation so you can be more productive or more happy or more relaxed. I think that's what we've really been focusing on in our house, and I feel like we've turned a corner. And I think I keep in pretty close contact with my teams, as you might imagine, and I think a lot of the folks on our teams, as with our customers, are trying to figure out how to navigate entering that corner too.
That's a very good point. I think in the first few, just like you said, the first few maybe month or two, it was adjusting, figuring things out. But then also taking notice of, not looking at it as a negative, we're all at home, but a positive. Hey, listen, we're at home. Let's adjust to it. Let's see what we can do it together as a family. Yeah, I agree with you. There's been a lot of, not only is this situation, kind of impacting everybody in some which way, but there are positives that you can take out of it. And, just being at home with your family is definitely a positive.
I agree.
So jumping into it a little bit more, I'm actually curious, and a lot of questions always come up is, how did you get started in tech? Now, I've read and went through your bio and everything, but you can't get the same information directly from you get from a conversation. What really got you interested in tech?
Well, I think it all started with that human potential, that realization about human potential. And when I was working in the village, one thing was super clear to me. Any villager that had any technology, and a technology could be as simple as a bike, or it could be as expensive as a satellite phone. Any villager who had an edge like that had an edge, not just for their family, but for generations of their family. And so I didn't get a degree in computer science. I actually got a degree in liberal arts. And when I came back from Peace Corps, I was fascinated enough by technology that I started out in my career. I spent a couple years as a technical writer because I was good at writing. And I went back to school. I went to University of Washington, the extension program, and I took programming classes at night and on the weekends. And I got a technical background to work as a technical program manager at Microsoft, and then over time grew into a management role, and over time grew into a multidisciplinary manager role. And so again, that springboard of my Peace Corps experience with human potential, I think it did a couple of things. One is it, drove me to go explore my own human potential and go figure out how am I going to get that technical background. When I was at Microsoft, I was there for a little over a decade. When I was at Microsoft, I actually chose some of the most technical roles that I could find in order to put myself, again, in that boxing way, put myself in situations that were quite hard, quite difficult, and figure out how can I learn fast, how can I adjust, and how can I master my craft in this area.
A very interesting part to know about you. That is unknown. I don't think I could have found that anywhere, just coming from that background. So it's very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. What sort of boundaries did you face or have to overcome? I know some of it in your personal life and growing up and, experiencing that, but what about tech?
Well, I think, the most important thing for me in sort of assessing my path, I have to say, and I think this is true for a lot of people, I think a lot of people's obstacles are put there by them. It's their own self-perceptions of what it is that they should do. And so, for me, it was, I'm lucky because my family has always encouraged me to do basically anything. I grew up with the refrain from my parents of, you can do anything you want. You can be anyone you want. And so I always had that in my mindset. But then, when I was starting off and, getting established in tech and in those early years, I remember thinking to myself, maybe I shouldn't, or, maybe it's too much. And so for me, a lot of it was flipping around the question in my brain. And rather than saying, should I started saying, if I wanted to get that done by this super ambitious date, what would it take? And when I flipped it from should I to what would it take, then it was actually a very, mind-clearing moment, because what would it take for somebody who is action-oriented and, prone to moving fast anyway? It just turned it into, a problem. What would it take? Oh, it would take these things? Good, let's go.
Nice. That's very good. I think everybody should kind of take that and flip that question around. I do agree with you that, it's your own perception on that you can or can't do anything. So that's a very good point that you're coming across there. I'm going to jump into a little bit of questions. During this current time, really, you have your ears to the ground with customers. How are customers really dealing with the current pandemic or COVID impacts?
Yeah, I have to say that I have always had a tremendous respect for our customers. The things that they do every day, the experiences they invent, and the ideas they come up with are just amazing. And that has not changed. In fact, it's really been exciting to see how customers are using that creativity and that quick action to navigate what's going on today. And so, we have customers, as an example, where they know that data has gravity, and they know that the data that they are collecting today on customer patterns is going to be critical to have them manage their own decision making across their businesses over the next few months and really beyond that. And so those customers know the data is important. And those customers also know that they need to be super smart about all of their business decisions. And so what they're doing in a lot of ways is they're taking advantage of S3. And so S3 has 6 different storage classes across Glacier and S3. And so what a lot of customers are doing is they are using the different storage classes to save money without changing their applications. And what that means is that they are able to see, maybe 20%, 30% savings on their storage bill without much work. And they're doing it pretty simply. They're doing it either by moving some of their storage into something like Deep Archive, which is our cheapest storage class. It's $1 per month per terabyte. It's cheaper than tape. It's better than tape. You can get your data back in hours. And so customers are taking either data they don't want to delete because they know they're going to need it later, or data they know that they don't really access very much, and they're putting it into Deep Archive. Deep Archive has grown like crazy. It was our fastest growing storage class before all this COVID-19 hit, and it continues to just hockey stick growth from there. The other storage class that I've seen a lot of customers taking advantage of is something called intelligent tiering. And intelligent tiering is the only storage class out there that dynamically adjusts the price of your storage based on the access of your storage. And so if a customer was using S3 Standard, which is the default storage class before, they're just tiering their storage into intelligent tiering, or they're just doing all their data lake storage on intelligent tiering. And if a Parquet file doesn't get accessed in a month, they get a way cheaper price on that Parquet file for the month in the bill than they would if that Parquet file was being accessed on a weekly basis. And they don't have to do anything. It's just the intelligence of the storage class that's keeping an eye on your access, and it's dynamically adjusting the price of your storage every month based on the access. And so what we've seen customers do is not get frozen by the uncertainty, not try to stick their head in the sand and say, we're just going to freeze everything and stop, right? Customers are doing the right thing by moving forward and also making smart decisions about how they save cost while they do that.
Nice. I think that's really good. I actually have one more question, and we're going to end this. We're going to round it out, and don't worry, stay tuned for our next one. So, the pandemic was unanticipated and unwanted, and it challenged not only governments, commercial customers around the globe to really pay attention to citizens and customers and to respond quickly to their needs. I've seen our customers kind of move fast in the last several months than I have in the last several years. And despite all that's going on in the world right now, it's reassuring to know how many of our customers have been able to act quickly to deliver on their missions. And customers have seen a lot of benefit when moving their data to the cloud. So my last question for you, MaiLan, is why is it important to keep that momentum going?
Well, I think it depends on the customer, but I think in some cases, John, their increased usage during COVID-19 has driven that. So I'll give you an example. OTN is a healthcare not-for-profit company that's based out in Ontario. And they do telehealth using their telehealth services. And for them, because they were on AWS and because they were using S3 storage, they were able to scale almost overnight to that increased demand. And that was really driven by what's happening out there. That's true for a lot of our gaming companies. It's true for a lot of industries that have really been pushed hard to scale up. I think those are a lot of the companies that had already started this move to the cloud. I think what's been really interesting, John, is that we have a lot of customers that are still chained to these legacy hardware refresh cycles. And the customers that are chained to those hardware refresh cycles for the data centers have really had a hard time. Because during this COVID situation, you have to think about, do I really want to manage that data center? Do I really want to have to go through all of the necessary protections that I have to put in place for my staff? Do I know what's going to happen with my staff in a physical data center? those customers are having to stick with these, hardcore data center, old school, legacy appliance problems. And they had a hard time. They had a really hard time. And so we did see a pretty big increase in customers that wanted to move to a storage model where they aren't locked into that hardware refresh cycle, which they didn't like before. We talk to customers and they keep, 10, 20, 40, 50 people on staff full time to do nothing but data migrations. Yeah. Because after you buy the hardware appliance, it's got to take 6 months or whatever to come on in. Then it has to sit around in your data center for another 6 months to get racked and stacked. And then you have to migrate data from this data appliance to this new data appliance. And they're keeping all these people around to go do that. And they didn't like that to start with. But now you throw in all the complications of managing a data center during times of crisis like this. It really brought home, you don't want to do that. You don't want to be in the data center business, and you know that you're going to have data. IDC says that digital data is increasing at a rate of 40% year over year. And the question that a lot of customers are looking at is they're saying, do I want to support that growth of data in a physical data center? In the last 6 months, a lot of customers are saying, no, I do not. And they're starting this, as you say, quick move to the cloud so they don't have to be in this position in the upcoming months.
Actually, so those are some very good points. As you're telling me about some of those, you order it, not only you're ordering this storage, it sits there for 6 months, then you got to get it racked, then you got to migrate it over. Oh my God, that's like bringing back memories. The days of dealing with this and the bottlenecks that we come into with storages and the nodes and only handling so much traffic.
And it's so unnecessary, John. It's unnecessary. It's distracting for customers. They need to focus on their business more than ever now. There's a lot of really interesting business decisions ahead for a lot of our customers, and they do not need to be thinking about these legacy, old world problems in the data center.
Those are some very good points. In fact, it's hit home with me. So when I actually talk to some of my partners, those are some of the conversations I'll be able to actually bring back to them after speaking with you. So I really appreciate that. It's helped me have those conversations with them. What I'd like to do is I'd like to end this not only on an action note, but an ending here. MaiLan, do you have anything to add before we go ahead and close out this series before we do our next one in the upcoming days?
No, I think, part of what brings everybody who works on S3 or EBS, our block storage solution, or Glacier, our archive solution, into work every single day, or into their home office or their dining room table or their kids' room if it's not too messy. All of us are coming in here today to build the best storage solutions we can for our customers. And so I just wanted to end on the note and just say a big thank you to everybody who uses our block and storage, object storage solutions, because our services and everything we build is for you.
Very good point, MaiLan. Thank you so much. So I'd like to end this. Don't forget that we are going to have a live Q&A session after this series. So go ahead, click subscribe, hit the notification before we end this. What you want to do is you want to stay notified when we're actually going to do the live Q&A. We'll take questions live. We talked about this. We thought this was the best way to kind of get some of the interaction of the audience. Also, don't forget to follow me on Twitter. And, that's all I've really got to add. So the last thing, MaiLan, thank you so much for doing this. I had so much fun. I've learned so much about you. I feel that I kind of know you a little bit more on a personal level. So it's really good, really informative, and not only some of the S3 stuff. So thank you so much for joining me for this series.
Thanks for having me, John.
All right, everyone, take care, and we'll see you next time.